Okay, so thank you all for coming. This one is like my first spirituality related event, so it's kind of a little bit like my baby, because spirituality has always been a very deep interest of mine, and it means something different to everyone, and I like to define it as cultivating a closer and closer relationship to the source, and which that can mean something different, of course, to everyone. Another way to look at, or how I think of it, is moving up on the emotional scale. So kind of lower on the emotional scale are things like shame and anger, and on the other hand, it's it's like bliss and enlightenment. So for me, cultivating spirituality is cultivating that relationship with the source, and also moving myself up the emotional hierarchy. Okay, so today's book is Instant Enlightenment by David Deida. He's one of my favorite authors, and this book has 34 different practices that you can try as supposed to get you to that feeling of kind of like peace or oneness. And yeah, it's one of my favorite books, so I'm excited to share it with you guys today. And so we'll start with an icebreaker. Was there a recent activity where you felt a deep sense of relaxed peace, or where you felt close to source, or just that sense of peace? How about you guys think about that for a second, and then I'll share my answer first. So for me, I love meditation, so I spend lots of time meditating each day, and it used to be a bit of a grind for me. Kind of watching my thoughts was kind of boring and annoying because I couldn't control it, but now it's like this very pleasurable. It's almost, and I almost feel bad doing it. It's like, it feels so good that I just want to do it all the time, and that's when I feel really close with that sense of peace and stillness. Yeah. And you want to go next, Trent?
Sure. I suppose probably one of the times is like sitting outside in the sun and just kind of like letting go of things. That there kind of become this slew of things that I feel like I should be doing or should be learning and stuff like that, but it's kind of nice when I'm able to just let go and just kind of be present in the moment and kind of just relax into that.
I would say recently, just while driving, just being very relaxed, whether or not the music's playing or not, but just calmly driving, and similar to that, just letting go, emptying the mind.
Cool.
I gotta agree with Steph. I started meditating around 9 months ago.
Cool.
And I look I do it at night, and I look so forward to it. It releases everything, so that's with me too, and I'm learning more and more because it's just been recent, so
Awesome.
my meditation.
Yeah. I had an experience, it'll be 2 years ago this fall. I was flying back from Athabasca. I was just by myself in the airplane. Nice sunny day like it is today, hardly any wind, and I just leveled off at 5,500 feet above sea level. And and it doesn't happen very often. Maybe I've only had this experience 3 or 4 times, but I had a sense of peace, of oneness with the airplane, with the sky, with the ground. And it only lasted, I want to say, I wasn't keeping track of time, but 30 seconds, 15 seconds. But I felt one with everything. And that's the only way I can describe it. And it just happened.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
It gives me the shivers.
Yeah.
Was it daytime or nighttime?
It was daytime.
So you could see,
Yeah, but the leaves were changing on the ground, so there was fall colors, but just a blue sky. And it was just a moment, and I was by myself, so all I had was the engine, and there was some radio chatter in my headphones, but that was it.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Nice. I was, let's see here, I have a few in my head. I was driving back from my aunt's place, she lives in St. Albert. This is at nighttime, And one thing I like to do at night, if the weather's permitting, I like to actually stop if I'm on the highway and just kind of look at the stars. So I kind of pull to the side in like a dark area, and I just like felt the breeze was calm. It was warm, so I wasn't chilly. I get chilly very easily. And I just looked at the clear sky, stars. I love looking at the stars. There's still light pollution, but you get to see considerable more amount of stars than you do when you're directly in the city.
Yeah.
And I just kind of, I felt the breeze, felt the nature. Just I like to look out into the vastness of how big the universe is, right? And just kind of feel at one with the universe. And just like, I'm here in this moment, experiencing this. So that was like 2 weeks ago, but that's the one that comes to mind, I think, for me,
Cool,
is looking
yeah.
at the stars.
I never thought of like pulling on the side of the highway, but it sounds really nice.
It's just really enjoyable. I love doing that, especially if I'm going to like the national park. What was it? What is the name?
Elk Island?
Elk Island. I was thinking Buffalo Island. Yeah, Elk Island. Yeah, because there's bison there, that's why. Elk Island. Yeah. On the way there, it's pitch black, so it's a really good place to.
There's a light sanctuary there. There's a space that's dedicated for
Really?
removing light pollution.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
When I was I lived on a farm, so when I was little, I would look at the sky and I would see the northern lights, and it was just so eerie. You don't see them anymore, and that's because of the pollution. Like, it seems like you can't see them as much. Like, you can see them all the time.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, thanks everyone for sharing. So today's plan is to go through like a paragraph or two at a time, pause for discussion, if anyone has any thoughts to share or any questions. And because spirituality means something different to everyone, I'm very curious to hear everyone's interpretation, because I'm sure it'll be different how everyone reads this chapter. And just keep us on time. If there is any discussion that goes overly long, I will ring a bell just to signal, okay, 1 minute left for this chapter, and then before we move on. And yeah, okay, so now let's start. So chapter 1, God. What does it mean to open to God, or to love God? Imagine somebody you love the most in your life. Perhaps your child, your mother, your lover, or your best friend. Feel what it is to love that person. Let's take a minute just to feel that. Sometimes I find it actually harder to do with people, easier to do with pets, but of course you do you. Okay. So was there I was wondering if anyone wanted to share what happens in their body when they connect with that feeling?
Oh, just warmth, like a tingling.
This is so weird, but I feel it actually physically here when I think of that feeling. I don't know. Even like heartbreak and stuff, yeah, I feel it here when I feel like pain. But also like the love, like when I feel like overwhelming love, I feel it coming from like my mid chest. I'm talking really physical, but I don't know, that's where I feel like a feeling. I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah.
Almost gives you a little bit of butterflies, I think, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
I never thought about that until you just mentioned that.
For me, it's like I kind of like melt. It
Yeah, it makes you a little
me.
weak, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Now we have that kind of feeling as like a benchmark.
Jello.
Jello.
Yeah. I just like a little bit of. Okay. Oh, I skipped a part. Because the first part is what does it mean to open to God or to love God? So I thought we would have a discussion about the word God, because of course that's very different for everyone. And I'll start because I've been following Deida's work for quite a while, and if you're familiar with his work, he uses God kind of to describe the state of complete openness, where you're open to everything in the universe. God is like everything and nothing. It's just
Mhm.
all encompassing. And so to open to God or to love God is just to open and to love basically like everything. So your heart is open to infinity. Deida also uses openness and love interchangeably. To him, loving someone is basically your heart is open to them. Yeah, so I don't know if anyone has anything they want to add to that.
Paul says, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right. He was a French philosopher, mathematician, 17th century, but he described God whose center is everywhere and circumference is nowhere.
Mm. So,
Yeah, and he also talks about infinity as well.
To me, the word God has evolved over time. So growing up, my parents would tell me that God created everything, and like, you know, so I imagine a physical guy in the sky. Actually, I imagine fun fact. I actually imagine God as a female when my mom told me what God was, because God was all loving, all encompassing, almost like this caretaking figure. That's how she described it to me. So I imagine God as a maternal mother in the sky. This is when I was like 3-4 years old, and that's kind of the image that I kind of grew up thinking of God as. And then when I reached like my adolescence, I kind of became a little rebellious, and I didn't really believe in God. And I became like, I called myself an atheist at the time. But then I started getting in touch with more of a spiritual side, and I could find elements of that spirituality in traditional religions as well, and also in like other philosophies of all religions. I could find that tinge of spirituality that I know was inside of me. So growing up, my definition of God evolved not to be like a single deity, but kind of just that concept of openness and connection with the universe. Like, you can find God by yourself. You can find God when you're like God's in this room and we're talking to each other and connecting with other human beings. God's when you're like in the forest. Anything, right? That's just that connection and spiritual openness. To me, that is what God is. So when I think of that word God, that's what I think of God as now. Instead of just like in a more religious sense, but rather more of a spiritual sense. That's kind of how it's evolved for me.
I have sort of a little bit of a dilemma. Like, I have beliefs. I believe in spirituality. I can never say it. But I don't like the label God, you know. You said source, and that really kind of, a source, because I don't want to point, you know. It's, so that, and I grew up in a very religious family, and very religious, but they really didn't practice the religion. Like, to me, religion is loving your neighbor, it's caring, it's helping, it's not saying anything bad about people. That's my religion. But I found that not in all of the parishioners in the church. So it was hard. So now I'm so glad we're talking about this. So I'm listening now. I want to hear people.
Yeah, anyone have anything else to add?
Yeah, I'll just go back to Blaise Pascal and his book, where he talks about this infinite being or infinite potential. Spinoza talks about infinite attributes. That there is, I believe Aristotle may have said this, but he said that God was the first cause. And what is the cause then before God? So to get around this riddle, I like the idea of infinite. Everything is infinite. There's no beginning. There's no end. It's more aligned with Eastern religions or Eastern philosophy, which makes more sense to me than a linear.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So, next paragraph. Now pick an object near you, like this book, or the floor beneath you, or a nearby pillow. Love whatever object you choose with the same intensity with which you love your most loved person. So that kind of, we need to kind of access kind of that feeling before that we had, kind of that open, tingly softness, and then see if we're able to feel that same goodwill and compassion towards something completely different, potentially inanimate. So let's take a minute to try that.
Pick this pillow. This cuddly pillow is easy to love, actually. Nice and simply.
I find it tremendously hard.
I find it hard until I start attributing the object to the person. So, for example, me and my brother always talk about this, like my mom's blanket that she has, right? The thing that makes that blanket so adorable to us, and so like best to us, is that the fact that we know that it's my mother's blanket, right? We attribute it to that person, or you know, I'm sure everyone has people in their lives. Like you look at, like for example, my sister left to live in Vancouver permanently because she found a job there and she went for school, and she had in the freezer she has ice trays because she likes to eat ice. She has iron deficiency. She likes to eat ice. And the other day I was holding her ice tray in my hands, and I felt like love. I felt that feeling of love towards the ice trays, right? But it's not the physical ice trays, but it's rather the attribution of that to the person that I love.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Cool, yeah.
so if you can kind of imagine the
yeah.
person and the object, I think you can kind of feel that feeling towards the object itself too.
Yeah, I never thought of using that approach. That's really cool. Because like for me, I kind of go the opposite. I connect with that feeling of love first, and then I try to project it onto that inanimate object. But yeah, I find it tricky, and it takes, I guess, practice. And
Right.
Yeah.
Like this could remind me of my mom because it's snuggly, right? And it's warm. And then I attribute that to my mom, right?
Yeah.
So now I can feel
I
that
see
towards the pillow.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's, yeah.
And I think another issue or another obstacle is the word love itself, because love is also kind of like spirituality. There's so many different meanings in that word, and then like we can't necessarily love like a mic the same way we love a person, but we can appreciate it or feel goodwill towards it. So sometimes maybe changing the word love with something else might be helpful too. Yeah, anyone have anything to share about the experience or comments?
I just think when I draw on the memory, it can never be as intense as the actual moment. It's no matter how much I think about, let's say, my cat who passed away here 2.5 years ago. That cat is not here right now, and so the memory is still brings back nice memories, but it's the intensity is, I can never bring it back up to its original level.
Yeah, I think a lot of like spiritual texts, depending on which, for example, Eckhart Tolle, he's really into the present moment. He's like, there's nothing more important or nothing more intense than being totally completely present. And then anything in the past or the future is just kind of created by the mind, and so it can't necessarily compare.
Another situation like that I have is, of course, I'm picking my daughter. I cannot love and I'm saying I cannot love anything more than my daughter. And thinking about loving something else as much as I love her makes me feel guilty.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So that's sort of a situation I have, like she's my world, and how can I pick something else and call them my world, my love? Yeah, so I have that problem.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, that's why I think this discussion is really cool, because like when I read the book myself, I kind of have my own way of looking at it, and then it's like
Yeah.
it's really nice hearing. I wonder if it might help to think of like maybe instead of loving something the same intensity as your daughter, it's like 99% of that.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think another direction we could be going with this, if you can love a microphone as intensely as your daughter, then your daughter and microphone and everything else is a single source.
I see what like open up a little bit.
Mhm.
Like I
Yeah.
see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, so the problem I do a lot is I compartmentalize things, put them in categories, or compare, for example. And the idea is, to minimize those polarities and to bring it more, looking for similarities rather than differences.
Awesome. Okay, so the next paragraph here. I'll probably do the next two. So, you may feel strange loving a book, floor, or pillow so fully, but you can do it. Practice loving until you feel your chosen object with the same love you offer your most loved person. When you can love an object as fully as your most loved person, then practice loving the space around you. Love the space extending in front of you, behind you, left and right of you, above and below you. Love outwardly in all directions, with the same feeling with which you open to your most loved person. So let's give this activity a little bit of a try. I find that this one got a little bit difficult for me. For me, it's easiest to think about like the 1 foot in front of me, but like above, below, to the side, something that I struggle with. But yeah, let's give it a try. I remember, I think I tried doing this once, and it was a very peculiar feeling where it felt like kind of like looking out on a prairie, on a horizon, where it's just like this is like vast openness. I only was able to experience it once, but it was really cool. But I haven't been able to access that state again, and it just felt like my heart was so open. But yeah, I don't know if anyone has any comments to share from their experience.
Certainly tough to extend it all the way out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think with a lot of, even though the book is called Instant Enlightenment, I feel like a lot of these are like practices that need repeated attempts.
I think kind of the theme of this paragraph, kind of trying to remember this properly, is being okay with where you are no matter what, and accepting everything else around you as, by loving it, you're accepting it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So no matter what situation you're in, like you could be annoyed at the situation, or you could accept it for what it is and love it and embrace it for everything that it is and try to find the good in it. And that it's just kind of seeing, it's the simpler way to put it is just see the bright side of things, right? Is to kind of just find the happiness in it that you can, right? So you could be uncomfortable in your chair right now. There could be a number of different things that you're upset about in any given moment, right? But try to find the love in every aspect of it. Try to love every bit of it, and you'll embrace it fully for what it is. And that, therefore, you're not living with any of that like resentment, even like meaning resentment or hatred or negativity at all. That just kind of you emanate, and then you emanate that further out, right? That like if you're loving everything around you, you will emanate that, and the energy will pass on to other people. Just a thought.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, any more comments before we move on to the next paragraph? Which is also my favorite paragraph. Okay. Then practice loving everything within you, even your darkest secret places of shame and perversity, with the same love you offer to your most loved person. This may take some time, or you may be able to do it right away. And it's my favorite part because self-love is something I've been struggling with for a long time, and a lot of times it's easy to love someone else but not ourselves. But we're equally as worthy of that love as anyone else is, and it's interesting because it gets into like shadow work and integrating our shadow. So maybe parts of us that we feel shame about, a lot of times we buried it and suppressed it, and we don't even know it's there. And so one way that I like to kind of identify it for myself is, what trait do I judge in others? That trait that I judge in others is something that I definitely would judge in myself, and it's part of my shadow. So, let's see, what was the example? Oh, that's funny because Peter's here. Anger is in my shadow because I'm really bad with expressing anger in a healthy way, even though I used to teach anger management. And so when people get angry, a lot of times it's like I judge them. It's like, why can't they just be calm? It's like it's nothing, but it's because I disowned my own anger. And practicing loving that part of me or other parts of myself that I don't like is an interesting practice. So.
I feel like all your anger comes out at me.
You help me express it. So actually, maybe before we try this practice, maybe we can do a little brainstorming, because sometimes it's hard to access our shadow. So it's like, what are certain traits that you find like very repulsive in others, or that you judge in others?
Oh.
Judgment.
Closed-mindedness, I think.
Okay, yeah.
What
When
did
people
you
are
say?
quick to judge. When people are quick
Closed-mindedness is what he said.
Closed-mindedness.
Yeah.
I don't know how to put it into a good word, but whenever someone is quick to just see something negative about something, like, there's people in my life that are like that. Like, let's say we go to a restaurant and we go have a meal, the first thing out of their mouth is like, oh, it's too this, it's too that, in a negative way.
Yeah.
And like, yes, it may be too salty, it may be, but why is that the first thing out of your mouth?
Yeah.
Just enjoy life, My dad gets like that sometimes when we go to restaurants. But that's because he worked in the restaurant industry, so I guess he thinks that, he has like better opinion. But, I don't appreciate when people just make quick negative comments.
Yeah.
It brings it down for me.
Yeah.
So it's not the kind of energy that I like.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay to have your opinion, though.
Yeah.
Of course.
And so maybe there's a part of you that is kind of like a whiny, complaining part of you, and
Totally,
it's
yeah.
the part that maybe needs some love. I don't know.
That's a good point, though. Like, let's say I do find something negative that it might be detracting me, but I'm gonna try to love it. I'm gonna try to be positive about it, but that might be draining me, right? Mm-hmm. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Or like, because our negativity comes up for a reason. So when we try to push it away or say that it's bad to be negative, when we're negative, then it kind of takes away, because it's like a messenger, we kind of like ignore that messenger.
Yeah.
Whereas when we are able to love it and be like, oh, like for example, oh, it's whiny Steph again. Hi, whiny Steph. Like, I'll accept you and let me know your message. But
right, and then you can accept it in others. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, and project love towards it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's also too, it's like the negative traits in others that we kind of have accepted or dealt with don't really tend to bother us, but it's those negative traits that we haven't really dealt with in ourselves and haven't really accepted that kind of bug us. So like, for driving, it's like most people doing silly things doesn't really affect me that much. But I know for, you mean your sister and her husband, it's like they both get mad at drivers very easily, but they also do silly driving things at the same time.
Yeah. Ugh.
And then on the other side too, it's like the things that we tend to really admire in other people tend to be traits that we haven't necessarily fully integrated and accepted in ourselves, that we have ourselves. Like one of my favorite people is Evan Pagan, and just for all of the information and wisdom he has to share with people, but just recognizing like that admiration in him is like I have those similar traits, but maybe haven't accepted or embraced it to the same fullest extent. Does that make sense?
That's really,
Yeah. So maybe now let's try kind of that feeling of love and openness that we feel towards our most loved person. Let's take a minute and try offering it to ourselves. Okay. Anyone have any comments to share?
It's kind of funny. I was thinking about one of the farming videos I watched, and so they have cattle kind of in this pen or whatever, and they've got the hay on the other side, and there's these bars that they eat through, and one of the young cattle went through it, and when they're small, they can get back and forth, but as they get bigger, it gets to the point where their hips don't go through anymore, so it got halfway through, and so the farmer's trying to help the cow through and stuff like that. But you could tell it just kind of had given up. It was mad at itself, and it was just been like, it had been struggling for so long. And it made me think about how can you love yourself in that situation? Like, you've made problems for yourself, and it's like, oh, like, this was me being stupid. But still loving yourself in that moment. So like, kind of imagine that calf, because it kind of had given up. He's like trying to move its legs and move its hips, but he's like, hey, you gotta help me up. Like, you gotta be using your front feet, and you gotta be moving and pushing forward. But the calf are just like, just giving up. It's just like, screw this. And it kind of made me think of like myself, of just like you being kind of like an owner, and myself being a dog in some ways, of like things I've neglected. Like, I haven't taken myself out for enough walks, or fed myself healthy enough food and stuff like that. But still having that love and compassion, and kind of like, it can be very easy to be like mad and resentful and stuff like that, but I think it's more important to kind of keep that love and compassion for yourself, regardless of shortcomings and stuff like that. That it's just part of the game, and like, none of us are perfect, but just kind of going through that process and that journey of kind of acceptance.
I think it would come back to something I was thinking of for the first question, like loving God, right? And you took a different route, so you talked about things that we do for ourselves, but things that can happen to us as well, right? So like me getting rear-ended on my motorcycle, it's like, shit, this sucks, but clearly God is trying to tell me something, and so I should remain calm and just accept, like, that's loving the space around you. It's like, okay, this is what's happening to me right now. It's not what I wanted, but this is reality, and I should accept it and not beat myself up about it, and not beat the other guy up about it either. But accepting that, these things are occurring for a reason, especially if they're external. And then internal, I guess, you and we were discussing this last night, just the struggle to actually get yourself to do things that you know you're supposed to be doing and should be doing, and I guess having that mercy towards yourself as well, that it it can be incredibly difficult to lead and guide yourself and to continuously do that.
I've been experiencing lately, my whole life has changed since I retired, but if something has gone bad with me now, I'm so relaxed, and I say, it is what it is. That's my saying nowadays. It is what it is. What did I learn? Or I just about hit a person. I looked both ways, but the car was right there, so I didn't see the car, and I just about hit it, and I'm angry at myself, and I'm there, okay, it is what it is. You didn't hit them. Now really watch next time, So that it's strange. It's just sort of happened within the last few months, that attitude that I have now. It's not getting angry or mad. It is what it is. Let's see what we've learned from it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I think even one way to think about it too is like so it's your daughter, right? If your daughter went through a similar situation, how would you feel? Like, what advice would you give her? And then being able to turn that on yourself, of having that same compassion and love.
Yes.
Because I know that with Stephanie, is the one thing I taught her a lot, is like, she'd be very hard on herself, but I was like, imagine your sister. Like, what would you say if your sister had done a similar thing? And there's a lot more compassion and understanding. It's like, oh, it's human. Like, we make mistakes, and there's things we miss. And you can kind of have that understanding.
Yeah.
And giving that to yourself, I think, is just as valuable.
That's a real good strategy, to make yourself a third person. And now you're talking to Peter, but as someone else.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who is struggling
That's
under,
really,
under similar emotional trauma, if you will? How would you calm that person down? How would you calm Peter down?
Because like, imagine you being a parent to yourself in that sense. It's like if you were your own child, and how much you had that love and compassion and caring for them, and ideally you want to be a good parent, because some are like, pull out the whip and like, let's beat them into submission. But if you're kind of that high state parent, what would you provide? And like, learning to provide that for yourself, I think is very valuable.
Yeah. Very good point.
I'll add a couple points here. I found that when I was able to kind of turn that love to myself, I felt that I was able to relax even deeper and feel even softer. Because I think a lot of times the tension I hold is the expectations I have for myself. I found that interesting. And it also reminded me, because right now I'm studying a lot of books on Tantra and Tantric intimacy. And the first step is always you have to open to yourself first. Being able to love yourself, completely open to all the different parts of yourself. And then it's opening to your partner, and then through your partner opening to God. But it always starts with being able to love yourself. So, yeah. Any other comments to add before we move to the next paragraph? If you love one person, you can love God. God is everything and what is beyond everything, all of which you can love. Love everything and everyone whom you know and don't know, and you are loving God. Open to everything inside and outside of you, even the unknowable mystery beyond everything. Open to feel and love all, the visible and the unknown. This is opening to God, or loving God. I think I'll start here. So I really like this because it says if you love one person, you can love God. And as humans, we all have the capacity to love. So it's saying that just by nature of being human, you are programmed to be able to experience this feeling of enlightenment. And we all have this capacity to feel this openness and expand this feeling of openness. So I like this paragraph. Another thing it reminded me of was actually here in this book, Secrets of Divine Love which is a spiritual journey into the heart of Islam. And it talks about kind of how God created everything, and because you love God, how can you not love his creations? Even if his creation is like, say, this like wild barking dog or something, but you know, it was created by the creator, and yeah, I don't know. That's just what it reminded me of, that line in that book.
One of the things I was thinking about is that, so I've been reading the GAPS diet book, and she talks about kind of a different perspective on health, and that we kind of have all these different bacteria and viruses and worms and protozoa and all these kind of things naturally in our bodies, and it's very much like the soil. Like, they all kind of counterbalance each other. Like, some fungi are eating like the bacteria, like the viruses, and so all that kind of stuff. And when you have them all there and all present, they keep each other in check, and they kind of create this very healthy environment. And it's kind of when we start to try to remove things that the problems start to come up, or it might be that we have too much sugar or something like that, and then it causes an overgrowth of bacteria. And so kind of one of the things I'm seeing from that is we have these kind of negative connotations of disease and all these kind of things, but what if it was more, it's like, it was kind of like, it's actually responding, it's actually trying to make the system better. So it's like, these fungi are coming out to deal with disease cells, so they're breaking it down and trying to continue that cycle. And it's kind of like, when you start to see it in those contexts, it's, for me, it kind of brings it together, that it's like, it's all kind of happening in a positive way. Kind of like, another thing, I've been watching a lot of farming videos and seeing different weeds come up, and it's like, dandelions kind of have these deep tap roots, and they're designed to deal with compaction. And so kind of like in our society, we're very against dandelions and spray them and get rid of them. But they're actually trying to heal the soil and stuff like that. And so to me, it kind of gives a purpose to everything, in a sense that kind of with nature, there's kind of this positive intent behind what's supposed to be happening, even if it outrightly seems negative. It kind of adds more purpose to it.
Yeah, it's almost like a balance. Nature is trying to balance. And without that balance, then things can go out of kilter either way. So when I talk about the medicine wheel and the 4 quadrants, there's a smaller circle in the middle that represents balance. And so it's having the right amount of physical activity, mental, spiritual, and emotional. And too much or too little of it, or in your case, too little fungi, is going to create, it's analogous to a car with 3 good tires, but the 4th one is low. And if you continue driving on that, it's going to affect the other 3.
Yeah, affect the whole car. You mean like things are going to start to break and stuff.
Yeah, and so the same thing that you were talking about is that fungi, parasites, bacteria have a purpose, even if we don't understand what that purpose is, or that purpose does not become self-evident until a much later time. But you know, when I think of God, I also think of balance, or homogeneous way to live. You know, not too much or too little of. You know, and just trying to find the right, or moderation, living in moderation.
Awesome. Every instant you love so fully is enlightenment. But because you are habitually used to contracting your feelings, in the next instant you may suddenly find yourself absorbed in picking your nose or scratching your chin as you work for world peace by writing your congressman. And this is like, enlightenment is something different to everyone as well. This is what Deida describes as enlightenment, like total, complete heart openness to infinity. And basically a kind of dissolution of all personal boundaries as well. And that oneness with everything. Yeah, I think it's interesting the part where it's very easy to kind of lose touch with that openness, because it's kind of, it's like, oh, there's an itch on my face, or I absentmindedly do something or say something, but anytime I bring myself back, I get back into that mode. Yeah, I don't know if anyone has anything to share for this paragraph.
I don't think for myself I could love so fully and keep it at that level ad infinitum, if you will. It's very hard to do that.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, but being aware, or to bring myself back to be as fully in that moment as you can, I think is better than nothing, right?
Yeah, yeah. I like that, and I feel like I probably move like 1 millimeter towards that state of complete openness a year. So I mean, there's like still miles left, but every millimeter I move, it feels good. I think instead of kind of lost in kind of that, I don't want to call it unconscious, because I am conscious in a way, but it's kind of like this maybe sleepwalking state. I'm not fully present or aware.
Yeah.
Next paragraph here. Your loving may be truncated for days as you become lost in duties, chores, and emotions. Raising a family, succeeding at a career, talking, sexing, or eating. You may not be opening to God for the sake of your temporary experience. Your ever-changing life never quite fulfills you for good, and you know it. I find this paragraph very interesting as well. I think it is very easy to get lost in our day-to-day life and duties. It's a little bit easier for me now because I work as kind of like a part-time tutor. When I was working full-time, it's just like my days just go by and I don't even know where they go. And it's really easy for me to feel that wide openness when I meditate, but it's like the moment I stand up, I'm like bustling around doing chores and I've kind of forgotten that connection already. So yeah, I think that's...
Do you think that it's possible to... So it says your loving may get like lost as you become lost in duties, chores, and emotions, right? But do you think it's possible to use those, find ways to leverage them to express love and find God? Like while you're raising a family, succeeding, even pursuing like sex or eating, right?
Yeah.
Do you think it's possible to kind of flip it and like, because the natural tendency is to kind of get lost while you're pursuing that, right? Maybe you can flip it to try it.
I would say so, and you referenced that book about love in Islam, and the Islamic, like the principle is like the man, the woman, the child, the parent, whoever has all these duties, right? So
yeah,
if you have that intention and mindfulness of like, okay, why am I going to work?
Right.
You know, is it so I can get a paycheck and go to the strip club at the end of the month, or is it like, okay, I'm going to provide for my family, or I'm doing my duty to my family, to my community, or whatever. Your chores as well. You know, say you're a husband or a wife, you have these duties to one another, to your children as well. And I think if you bring that mindfulness into the activity, that I'm not just doing this because, oh, God put me here, now I got to suffer for 80 years cleaning my clothes, but like, and even you could look at like what Marcus Aurelius says about it as well, that like, you know, you're a human and these are all human tasks, so go and do them, right? Like you have to clean the house, you have to, you know, go to work, you have to bathe, you have to whatever it is. So I think if you bring that mindfulness in there, you can change the intentionality from, let's say, being like a mindless drone to like,
right,
you know, these are things that I get to do, and this is a service that God has allowed me to conduct.
Yeah, kind of living your life with honor and responsibility, right? Like that's something that I found has helped me a lot. Is if I go to work, or if I'm in a relationship, or I'm arguing with my mom about something, like chore related. But when you start to see your life as like, I have a role to play. Like I am, like the eldest son, for example, is to say, right? Or I'm the boyfriend in this relationship, and you see things like I have an honor to provide. Like I have to provide for my mom in a different way, my girlfriend in a different way, my friends in a different way. It's a role that I have, and I see it as a responsibility. In an almost spiritual sense, like this is like the role that was given to me in this instance. Then it's much easier to do the hard parts, the difficult, the things that feel like meaningless or like just, I can't think of the word.
Well, one thing I might bring to that is, in a lot of sense, it's the awareness that brings you back. So it's kind of like playing a video game. So Stephanie got into Age of Empires recently, and it was just like everything else was just gone. Like I'd like wouldn't see her like for 3 or 4 hours, and then I'd come in her room, and she's just like, I'm feasting on the cries of my enemies. And so there's a way to play video games where it's like it's all consuming and you just get sucked up into it. But there's also a way to play where you're aware. Like you can be aware that you're playing this game, and that's one of the things that Deida talks about in the way of the superior man, is that like you want to be doing this, but you also want to be aware of your awareness at the same time. And it's like, so you taking that step back and being like, oh, I'm a boyfriend here, or I'm a son, or I'm a brother, or whatever it is. It's almost that form of awareness of like, instead of just being like completely focused in this event, like screw them, they're trying to get me to do stuff I don't want to do, I'm tired, blah blah blah, don't they see this? You're taking that step back and you're seeing, hey, it's like I'm aware of me, I'm aware of them, I'm seeing what's going on. Because in a lot of sense, our life is like that video game. It's like, I mean, it's all going to come to dust. It's kind of like when you turn that game off, it's just gone. And I think in our life, it's going to be that way. And you can look at that's completely meaningless and there's no purpose to it. Or you can look at it, kind of how I look at it as a game, it's like it's enjoyable. You mean, it's fun to have that game, to play that role, to kind of be a part of that story, and to play it, you mean, in different ways, to try different patterns, different things, and to see what you like and what you don't like. And it's just a game. And kind of, for me, there's times when I'm very attached to things, and it's kind of like a golem of like, my precious. And then there's kind of like this other side of just like, oh, like you mean things come, they go, kind of the alchemist of like, he was given gold and then got stolen a number of times, and that process continued. But being able to just flow with it, it's like, hey, this happened. It's, you mean, just part of the game, it's part of life, and kind of letting it go and flow. And to me, that's kind of what brings more of it, is that, because I actually like consciousness better than love necessarily, because I think I'm more masculine. But it's like letting go of my attachment, because like there can be this attachment of like, oh, these politicians, they need to change, and the government needs to change, and inflation and all these kind of things. But it's like, if I was thinking about a game and that they have the evil ruler in there, it's not like I can be like viscerally like, oh, Ganondorf's in control of the world, screw this game, like the whole world sucks. It's just like, oh, okay, I mean, it's like, okay, I'm going to play, I'm going to do my role, I'm going to do what I can do to try and fix that, but not necessarily have that attachment to it. Does that kind of make sense?
Interesting. Yeah, it makes complete sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, it's like, I like to use brushing my teeth as an example, because before it's like, oh, brushing my teeth is like the most boring thing ever. I have to put a show on to watch while I brush my teeth, because I can't just sit there and brush my teeth. But now instead, I'm trying to like maintain that connection to that openness I feel when I meditate while I brush my teeth, and that's kind of, well, I'll probably do it once every 3 days. The other 3 days I'm watching shows, but like I'm trying to like make an effort to stay in that state.
Yeah.
Even when I'm doing something that feels totally...
Well, I know something cool.
mindless.
This reminds me of your Gamify thing. I got a new toothbrush. It's a Sonic here. And it has like Bluetooth.
Oh,
It's like
okay.
connects with your phone, and it measures your like brushing habits. And shows you like charts and stuff. And I'm a little addicted to brushing my teeth now.
Oh,
Yeah.
there
Give it a
you
shot.
go.
Yeah. And now, like, it shows me on my health app how much
Yeah.
time I spent. Oh, you brushed more this week than you did last week. Keep it up. I'm like, oh, I want to keep going.
Interesting.
Just a thought.
Yeah. Cool. And then there's another line that I really like in this paragraph, which is, "Your ever-changing life never quite fulfills you for good, and you know it." So in Daida's other work, he always talks about how chasing experiences and accomplishments never fully fulfills you. Those are all kind of illusions. Only like fulfilling thing is kind of your full presence or love or consciousness in the present moment. And that can be a little bit hard to grasp sometimes. I remember reading a lot of spiritual texts and never fully understanding that. It's like, how is this present moment fulfilling? It doesn't actually do anything. Like, I'm not creating anything, but then until I kind of reached a certain meditative state, and it's like, oh wow, like, yeah, nothing really matters. Yeah, I don't know. I just thought that was interesting.
Well, one of the things I think like he talks about for guys is we have a tendency to think about how we can make the next moment better with something that we can do. So like one of the things that I used to have and still do at some points is like money. It's like thinking like if I had more money it would change something, and if I had that beautiful girl or I had whatever, my own business, that it's going to change something. And one of the things that I really liked from Deida is that he talked about, it's like if you just are aware to be the consciousness, that presence right now, you actually have what all these guys are chasing. Like they're trying to become millionaires, billionaires, have nice fast cars, have beautiful women, because they're looking for this sense of completion, like finality, like this is done. And to me that was very insightful, that it's not necessarily that you got to go down just this nihilistic path where you don't do anything, but it's like it's been very peaceful for me of kind of like I've accomplished a lot of the things that I set out to accomplish. Like I kind of set back when I was about 18 years old and I had kind of these dreams and goals of what I want to build and create, and they're kind of coming to fruition now, and it's creating a sense of peace, not necessarily so much because the actual accomplishment of them did a lot, they did make my life better, but it's kind of like he talks about our primary purpose as a man is to be consciousness and be present, and then we have secondary karmas of things that we are to do or to accomplish that kind of interfere with our presence and our awareness. And so it kind of dealt with a lot of those secondary karmas, and it's very peaceful and it's very relaxing. It's like, it's nice. And then kind of like getting more in touch with my own purpose is trying to help other people and kind of help them, not necessarily in a needy way, but like it's like being that kind of guide. Like one of the things, that a story I really liked was a newspaper or like a reporter or whatever was asking a mountaineer guide about like, hey, like, you mean there's all these people that died on Everest in a storm, and it's like, why do you guys do this? Like, and if you didn't have the tourists that you're with, could more people have survived and stuff like that? And he's like, yeah, most certainly, like probably more people would have survived because we're all good hikers and we could have got down. And the reporter's like, why do you do this? And it's like, well, obviously you've never been to the top. Because it's like, if you've been to the top, you'd understand what it's about. And it's like, it's our job to bring people to the top. It's our job to bring people on the journey with us. And like, I was even watching the Golden State Warriors, and like, they just won the championship this year. And you could see how impactful it was for a lot of older players to bring new players on that journey with them, to bring them to the top. And so, to me, that's been a very exciting process of helping Stephanie, helping Najib. Like, even this event, to create it, it was pulling teeth. Like, she just did not want to do it. And it was like a fight for like a week and a half back and forth of like, I'm not doing it. And I'm like, you're doing it. And it's like, I'm not doing it. And doing it. And then when she kind of got over that hump, she was very excited and happy about it and took a lot of pride in it.
Yeah, I resisted you a lot. So I was like, oh, no one, like this event, no one's interested in spirituality, it's not going to happen, let's just do like a regular event, people like regular events. And then so it was a lot of back and forth, and finally, and then I got really excited. I was like, oh, this is like what I've always wanted to do. Yeah. Okay, next paragraph here. Instant enlightenment is to love, right now, as if you are loving your most loved person. No matter what you are feeling or experiencing, inwardly or outwardly, you can love without holding anything back. This is what it means to love God. I think I'll start with, because for this paragraph, I think one of the easiest questions that come up is, what if they're hurting me? What if they're a bad person? Like, why do I have to love them if they're being bad? But I think, and it's definitely difficult to open and feel love when we are hurt in some way, and because tension is how we protect ourselves. But when we kind of close or isolate ourselves, at the separation, that's what Deida calls forgetting love. And it's not a pleasant feeling. Like, I don't know how to describe this. So say I have an argument with my partner, and if I close down, then I'll feel separated and alone. It's like, they doesn't love me, so that's a certain negative emotion. But if I open to the pain and allow the hurt, but still have that love, where it's like, okay, this is kind of his parental upbringing, his trauma, like this is what leads him to do this way, I try to love him despite it, I will feel hurt, I'll still feel hurt, but it's going to be softened by that goodwill and compassion, and it will be less sucky than the former. That's kind of how I think of it. Yeah. So even if it's like someone hurting you or someone who might not, is a bad person, like we can still open in love to that situation, I think. It's kind of how I interpret this paragraph.
Okay.
Very difficult, of course. My initial instinct's always just to shut down, but I'm a lot better. Like I remember, when I first moved into the house with Trent. It's like sometimes I was still kind of emotionally immature. If he says something that I don't like, I just close my door and don't talk to him for 3 days. But now, it's like okay, trying to understand, talk through it. Yeah. I think it's gotten better. I hope you agree.
Now she just has verbal outbursts in a moment.
Yeah, I call it throwing a tantrum. But I'm still learning on the path. Getting in touch with my dark, angry shadow side. Trying to integrate it.
That's really interesting. I'm just gonna, I don't know, maybe you guys can help me. I have a close friend that I don't know why she's mad at me. And I can't approach her because I stumble on my words, and she's a lawyer and she knows how to fight back and stuff like that. I do love her and stuff, and I do want to approach her. And this is going on for a year. And all my other friends are saying, what's wrong? How come you guys are kind of, and I'm there, I don't know, I don't know. So, I do, and I do love her, but I don't want to, I don't know how to say it. I love you, but what did I do wrong, over the last year kind of thing. So there's a person that I'm not angry at her. I'm not angry at her. She's angry at me for some reason. But I want to get past that. I want to get past that.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're always our groups are always together, and it's I don't know.
Does she still
I
talk to
love you, but what is it? So I don't know why I brought that up. It's the anger part,
Does she still talk to you?
She does, but it's very different. Yeah, it's very, very different. We were so close.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what I did.
Maybe you didn't.
Maybe I didn't do anything.
Maybe this is her stuff,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
and
when she's ready.
when a person's angry with me and I cannot rationally think why they're angry with me, then I am used as an instrument or an object where they are projecting their anger toward. So it may have nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
It may be some unresolved issue
Yeah.
in her own life, or
Yeah.
could
And
be
it's
even
just-
decades
It's
ago.
on me.
Yeah.
Yes.
But the anger,
To me, there'd be two
But-
parts. It'd be like, one, hurting people hurt others and are easily hurt by others.
yeah.
So, and then two, I might look, has there been a pattern of her doing this to other friends in the past?
Yeah. Yeah.
Has she been like, has there been people that kind of hurt her, or, and then she kind of distances herself and doesn't really bring it up? Because I've had it where, like, I met one guy and he's like, he complained about how he'd become really close friends with people, and then like 3 to 6 months later, the friendship would kind of fall apart. And then I realized it's like, oh, it's because you're low conscientiousness and you have low character. And so people, like, at first you look like really good, but then as people kind of see it, it's like, I don't really want to be around this person. And then he would get really mad at them, and then in turn getting really mad at me because I had the same thing. So it might be, it's like, has there been other friendships that in the past that she's kind of run away from because of these hurts and
Yeah,
future
but
patterns?
it comes back to loving too, you know. I'm not playing that game, you know. I'm a nice person. I know I'm a nice person, you know. So if there was something that I did do that upset you, I did not mean it. So, you know, I care for you, I love you, you know, kind of thing. So I'm just backing away, you know, and just love everyone. You know, and that's kind of where I was coming from. No matter how angry how angry someone is at you or you're at them, you still have to love. You still have to bring that in. And maybe by bringing that love in, we'll fix things. Maybe, bringing that love in, bringing in God kind of thing, will fix it. I don't know.
And that's another thing it reminded me of is like potentially like jealousy could be something that can turn people against one another. And then it's interesting because usually the nicer you are to someone who's jealous, the more you push them away.
That's a good point.
Did it happen around your retirement?
Pardon?
Did it happen around your retirement?
No, it happened when I was going through a really, really bad time. And something that I did do every year to help her out, I had to go deal with my mother. I had to say, no, I can't do it. I have problems here. I have problems with me, and I have problems with my mother. I have to fix it. And that's the only thing I can think of, that I chose myself and not her.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
You might have found your answer.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, people don't like it when you change because the ways they manipulate you don't work anymore.
Yeah.
So it's like, you mean she kind of had this good gig going. It's like any kind of problem she had, you'd be there and you need to show up.
Yeah.
And this first time you're like, no. And then it's very easy to get kind of emotional.
Sometimes they're not even aware of it,
Mhm.
right?
You said you would help her frequently with this thing?
Oh yeah,
What-
every year it's a golf tournament that she puts on, and every year I help her put it all together, clean it all up and stuff like that. And instead of me staying the next day to clean it up, I went to deal with a medical matter in the family, and even myself, because
Did anyone else help her?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, someone did.
So she might just be kind of ticked off
I
that
think,
that you left.
exactly,
Okay.
yeah. And I think the retirement kind of comes into, because my life is great right now. You know, meeting new people and stuff like that. It's, yeah.
Well, it's kind of like, you mean in a divorce, and like, let's say like the guy goes and gets a young beautiful girl, and the woman's like,
Yeah.
and so it's like if she's working at a job that maybe she's has some issues with, and she sees you like having fun, living it up, or doing whatever, and you're happy, it's like that's also not very.
You know what? I think you
Yeah.
hit it on the nose there, because instead of me like being mad because the way she's treating me,
Mhm.
I'm just being really, I'm being nice to her, and I'm doing what I'm doing, and like I told her, don't forget, I'm going to help you this year, kind of thing. And I kind of threw in, I'm sorry I didn't last year, but I was going through some personal stuff, but, and that, maybe that's it too, because I'm not getting mad at her for her getting mad at me.
Well, she sounds like a warrior. And a lot of times with a warrior, you need to actually bring up your own warrior spirit to kind of talk with them. That it's like, you need to be like, bitch, like, you're being and just kind of lay it down. And that's what she hears, because it's like, think of a lawyer in the courtroom. It's like, you kind of need that adversarial relationship.
I'm not that way, though. I can't do it. She is. Holy, she fights, know. And I don't know how I want to label myself, but as soon as someone starts fighting with me, I get like I can't talk, I can't, and I cry, and I can't defend myself, and so that's why I'm avoiding bringing it up, because I know that I should dig in.
If you think of her as a warrior, what she needs to respect is another warrior in a lot of sense. It's like, I think Peter has a lot of warrior spirit in him too. And it's like, if you had somebody you're pissed off at and they're kind of meek and all that kind of stuff, it's like, But it's like, if they came up and they're like straightforward to you and like, hey, you're being a jerk, blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, yeah, you're kind of right.
And that other person may end up respecting.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's
Totally.
true. But I don't want to get off the topic. I want to still bring up the fact that you have to love everyone. You can't. I'm feeling this. That you can't make judgments and stuff like that. You have to have that love within you. So that's how I feel.
Part of it too is like, so we have this king, warrior, lover, magician archetypes that we really like, and so what tends to happen and what tends to attract each other is opposite archetypes. So you're more of a nurturing type, and she's much more of a confident type. And so that's the same kind of dynamic that I have with Stephanie and Jeeve, is that I'm a magician and I'm much more creative and kind of divergent thinking, and I'm also much more confident. Like, I just go do what I do.
Right.
And I don't necessarily think about other people's emotions or feelings and stuff like that. I'm just focused on me. Whereas Jeeve and Stephanie are much more logical and kind of systematic in their thinking, and they're much more nurturing. So they imagine people's emotions a lot more than I do. So like, Stephanie sends emails to clients, and they're way better than my emails. Like, they're just like, I'm just like reading like, wow, this is really good. Like, this is like, it gets what I want to say across, but it also is very emotionally adept at the same time. But so one of the things I noticed with girlfriends I had when I was at university is like, I tend to like these much more logical, nurturing types, but they tend to be very boring in the beginning. And so the girlfriends I actually had they actually had some magician in them. Like, they're more of that queen type, but in the beginning they could actually jive with me on a magician kind of. They could do some verbal sparring, and it's like, oh, okay, this is pretty cool. And so with warriors too, one of the things that like the teacher I had, it's like, you kind of got to be able to fight with them at their level and bring that energy, and because they actually help bring that warrior energy out of you naturally. And like, that's kind of one of the things that's beneficial, because she probably made you more confident and stand up for your things, stand up for yourself in certain respects. Just like Stephanie and Jeeve have helped me to be more nurturing and to be more like, not as rough around the edges and kind of more systematic in my thinking. And so that might be because, like, that's one of the things I've tried to teach Stephanie, is that her answer to everything is compassion. It's like, if I just loved and cared more, all the problems would be solved. And I'm like, no. Like, some problems can be solved by compassion, and some problems can't. And you have to know which problems are, and more of a pragmatic attitude of like, sometimes I need to lay down the law, and sometimes you need to be patient and understanding. Like, I was listening to an interview with Steve Kerr, who's the coach of the Warriors. He's like, mostly I'm a very patient, understanding kind of coach, but there's some times where I just let loose, you mean, and it's just like, they're not playing, they're not awake, they're not whatever. And like, one time he like broke his like kind of writing pad or whatever, and like actually cut his hand from it. But like, team came back in the second half, and they just like won that game. And so there's times, and there's we want to be kind of like a master tool, that we have different skill sets that you might naturally be on the much more compassionate side, but there's a time and place for that low compassion. Like in your previous job, it's like there's employees that just need to be fired, that are just like sucking the organization dry, and you need to go through, and there's actually people who really enjoy that. They come through and they just like, it's kind of like a Genghis Kong of just like slice out all these people who don't belong. Because if you have all these compassionate people and a parasite gets in, none of them are able to get it out. You mean, and that parasite can just suck the resources out. And so you need somebody with low politeness and low compassion. It's like, I don't care what's going on in your life, you're destroying the group and you need to get the heck out. And so it's like, it's not just love that we want, because sometimes you're best served by love by having a warrior temperament and by staying down the law. Like, imagine this golf tournament, and it's like, people are like, yeah, I don't have money, like, can I come for free, and all that kind of stuff, instead of being a charity fundraiser or something like that. Now it's like, it's actually losing money, and then it kind of lost its purpose. So it's like, that's kind of like why in a lot of shows you actually have the 4 different temperaments of a warrior, king, lover, and magician, because they all kind of have their role. Like, I don't know if you watch Sex and the City at all, but it's like, one of them is a warrior, she's Miranda, and she's a lawyer, and like lays down the law, and Carrie's a lover, and she's much more compassionate and artistic, and Charlotte's a queen, and she's much more logical but also nurturing, and then Samantha's this magician that just makes everything happen and just kind of goes around and does crazy things. And they all kind of balance each other and help each other out in different respects, because Carrie just kind of gets walked over, but Miranda's like, no, you gotta wake up and like you gotta get things going. And ideally we want that in ourselves too. It's like we want to be able to pull out that warrior temperament when it's called, or that magician, or that king, or that queen.
That's interesting, thank you. Very interesting.
I always imagine Stephanie at level 9 of some game she's playing, and she annihilates 790,000 virtual beings, and she doesn't even blink.
That was Age of Empires.
But I annihilate them by converting them, not killing them.
Unless you can't convert them, you still kill them.
Yeah. There's something satisfying about the virtual screams.
I knew you would probably derive satisfaction from that.
And one last thing I just want to add to Wendy's topic is something that I saw is the word love is an acronym for letting one voluntarily evolve. So we're not like pushing them to be better in some way, just kind of accepting them that this is where there's going to be at, and this is what the relationship is going to be at, and I'll try to support you, but it's ultimately kind of up to them.
Please say that again. What's the acronym?
Letting one voluntarily evolve.
Yeah.
Letting one voluntarily evolve. That's a good one.
That's
Kind of coming at it without expectations, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not like pushing them to be a certain way, or putting them in a box.
Because then you're projecting onto them, right?
I can breathe now, you guys. How much do I pay you?
Well, it's actually one of the things that happened with Najeeb too, is that, so we lived together in an old house just as roommates randomly, and we had about like 3 to 4 months where it was like very growth, conversational oriented, and then it kind of like was like, okay, I'm good with that, and like he wanted to kind of go his own path. And then it was about 2 years later that we kind of reconnected and rebonded and stuff like that. And it's like, it's hard, I think, especially even as a parent, there can be times where your child wants to go off and do their own thing, but it's like, you kind of need to let people make their own decisions, and you can't force them to follow whatever path or whatever relationship. So it's like, you can't force her to be a friend with you if she doesn't want to be. And it's like, you can't necessarily have that attachment to the past of like, I was so great and it should still be so great. It's because as you change, it's like the things around you are going to change a lot, and the people, it's like, because like Stephanie, so she had one great friend, and when she was doing her masters, and they'd have lunch every day and stuff like that. But then as she kind of changed and evolved her path, because he kind of kept going down the standard path of like taking my masters, doing a job with that, going wherever for work, where she's like, yeah, I'm gonna do like anger management and work at a liquor store and I'm gonna do all these different kind of jobs. Those paths are very divergent. You mean he's kind of going the white picket fence standard route, and she's like, well, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm figuring this out. And you can't necessarily attach to what the past was.
It still hurts to think about that though, because I miss that friendship.
It's tough. You mean, especially with the Velcros of the world, it's hard to kind of let go of like these attachments, these relationships you have. It's easier for confident people, just like, But
one thing I look at is what is the difference between attachment and connection?
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I like connected a lot better. And it's like one of the things that John Maxwell talked about too is that he talked about trains and like one, it's like the engine would have to come to like all the other, like you mean all the other ones. It's like they're just like the ones that get pulled behind don't come to like the steam engine or whatever. But then too, it's just because you've hit them doesn't mean you've connected. And it's like you actually have to go through and it's like, hey, do we hit right and did it link in and stuff like that. And because ideally it's like you don't want to be necessarily attached to somebody because that basically it's like you don't have separate boundaries. You mean it's kind of like you're intermeshed. It's kind of that codependency. But ideally you want to be connected where it's like you can be unconnected, disconnected, and you're still yourself, but you can kind of have that connection with them.
That's a good point too.
Yes. I mean, Peter's comment made me think about my parents because, you know, there's a lot of emotional attachment, but I don't necessarily feel like this like genuine connection with my parents because we don't share interests or values or goals. But I mean, I love them very much, and there's that emotional attachment, but connection is it's not necessarily something I feel with them. But hopefully, we can build that with them.
But this goes all back to the first paragraph here is we're looking for that interconnectivity with people, places, and things, and to feel something with that. You know, whatever that is, you know, and love again is all encompassing, but you know, love, there's different kinds of love, if you will. But when we look at it in the context of God, love is the cornerstone of creation. You know, two people come together and they form a third entity. And that in itself is an act of creation because it's me, you, and then us is created, right?
Yeah, us. Yeah, loving God.
Okay, and let's last paragraph. I'll just combine these. So start by feeling the person you love the most, and open to include every aspect of each moment in the openness of your love. Offering yourself open in this way is instant enlightenment. Forgetting to love is the usual life of subtle torment. And actually that's a big theme of Deida's work. Living as an offering is kind of what he finds most fulfilling, is when you treat your life as an offering, rather than I'm here to give, rather than a kind of I'm here to get kind of idea.
That's one of the things I talked with you about before was like providing that love that you're most seeking instead of trying to get it by being willing to give it and stuff like that. That I think like in a lot of senses that's the only way to keep things. It's like John Maxwell had a story of like this guy got like 200 lobsters and stuff like that. Like they just caught a whole bunch and he's like, oh, I got lobsters for a year, this is great. And then he had some friends come over and he's like, hey, you want some lobster and stuff like that. And it just felt so good, he just started giving them all away. And then before he knew it, he had like 3 lobsters in his freezer. And he's like, well, you idiot, like you mean it's like you had lobsters for a year, now you barely got lobsters for dinner. And then a few days later he goes out to his garage and there's just this awful smell, and it turned out the electricity had gone out and stuff like that, and those 3 lobsters had gone bad. And is kind of like, like I'm so grateful I gave those away.
Yeah. Wow, that's a good one.
And it's a very kind of tribal mentality, is that before we had money and kind of all these resources that we could save, like the best way you could save resources was by sharing them. It's like you go kill a deer and you share that meat with everybody, and that kind of builds goodwill with the other tribes. And like, let's say you were taking over the next hunt, it kind of means that like, the people want to take care of your children, your wife, and stuff like that. And so to me, it's kind of like I've come to the conclusion that instead of trying to get for myself, of like get a fancy car or whatever, by giving to others, it's been a lot more. I've gotten a lot more back, one, but then two, I've kind of gotten a lot more enjoyment and meaning from that as well. So it's yeah.
That's good stuff.
I have a personal. It's from Yuval Noah Harari's book.
Is he the Sapiens author?
Sapiens, I believe he says in Sapiens.
Okay, this is the copy you gave me, Peter.
Yeah, you were talking about the book.
There it is. But he said, in a sense, I'm paraphrasing him, but when we stopped moving, when we transitioned from hunter-gatherer to farming, the species kind of went south after that, because what you describe is giving. You share in the hunt, you share in everything, and now we're accumulating. So now we have vast stores of grain. Now we have to protect that. So now we build an army, we build fortresses.
And you want more land and stuff like that.
More land. We need to acquire more land, and so we transition from a giving society to a materialistic society.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
That is interesting.
I also like to kind of how you talked about just like our stature declined.
Yes.
It's like we were kind of like these big, healthy beings, and then as we went on to grain, it's just like got shorter and more dental and tooth decay. And all that
I
stuff.
remember reading
It's
about the dental tooth
it's
decay.
like,
It's related to grain, right?
Yeah.
And how the diet changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you talked about how we were such good hunters, and like there'd be like these giant elephants and stuff like that, and we just wipe them out in like 500 years or something like that, just gone. We cut them all, and it's like, oh, okay. Would have been better if we could have found a more sustainable way to go about that, but
We already know back then. There's no way to know until we experienced it, right?
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if you watched the Simpsons episode, but I think it's like the Johnny Appleseed, but they basically just start shooting buffaloes just cuz, and then they just have like this big mountain of dead buffaloes, and they're all dead, and it's like, oh. Like, we have like fields of buffaloes, and then we kill them all. It's like, oh, whoops. So it's a tricky one. We tend to see opportunity as it goes by, and not as it's coming.
Yeah.
So, good job, Stephanie. I quite enjoyed
Well
this.
done, Steph.
Oh, thank you all for being my guinea pigs today. I appreciate it very much.
Looking forward to the next one.